The day started like any other birthday. Excitement was in the air, balloons scattered around the room, and the smell of freshly baked cake filled the small house. It was my nephew Tommy's 7th birthday, and he had been looking forward to it for weeks. As his uncle and godfather, I promised his mom, my sister Laura, that I'd make sure his party was unforgettable. Unfortunately, it was unforgettable for all the wrong reasons. Guests began to arrive in the early afternoon, their arms laden with colorfully wrapped gifts and wide, cheerful smiles. Tommy's friends from school, along with our extended family members, filled the backyard, which was decorated like a pirate's cove. I took charge of the grill, cooking hot dogs and hamburgers while the kids played and screamed with delight around me. Laura had hired a local entertainer, a clown named Mr. Giggles, who was popular in our small community for his performances at children's parties. He arrived on time, his suit more garish than cheerful, his makeup thick and slightly smudged. Something about his presence made me uneasy, a certain weariness in his eyes, a forced quality to his laughter. But I brushed off the feeling, attributing it to the usual stress of hosting a children's party. The show started off well enough, with Mr. Giggles pulling endless colored handkerchiefs from his sleeve and performing simple magic tricks that had the children gasping and clapping in delight. But as the act continued, his behavior became increasingly bizarre. His jokes, initially silly and light-hearted, took on a darker tone, making even the adults uncomfortable. "Ever wonder what happens to bad little boys and girls?" he said with a crooked smile, his voice dropping to a hoarse whisper not suited for a jovial party atmosphere. The children laughed, oblivious to the change, but the adults exchanged uneasy glances. I decided to keep a closer eye on him, my instincts on high alert. As the party progressed, Mr. Giggles seemed to focus more and more on Tommy, coaxing him to participate in tricks that seemed designed to embarrass or frighten him rather than entertain. Tommy, eager to please and revel in his role as the birthday boy, went along with it, though I noticed him glancing towards his mother more often than usual. The turning point came during a trick involving a large, antique trunk. Mr. Giggles explained that Tommy would climb inside, and he would make him disappear. I saw Laura stiffen, her maternal instincts clearly troubled by the idea. She started to object, but Tommy, caught up in the excitement and encouraged by his friends, climbed into the trunk before she could intervene. Mr. Giggles shut the trunk with a theatrical bang, locked it, and started to chant in a mock-mysterious voice. Seconds turned into a minute, and the playful atmosphere began to sour. Laura asked him to stop the trick and let Tommy out, but the clown ignored her, continuing his charade with disturbing zeal. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, I stepped forward and demanded that he open the trunk. Mr. Giggles, realizing perhaps that he had pushed the act too far, produced a key from his pocket. But when he tried to unlock the trunk, he fumbled, dropping the key and then struggling to pick it up with his oversized gloves. Panic set in, every second stretching out torturously. I pushed the clown aside, grabbed the key, and unlocked the trunk myself. When we opened it, Tommy burst out, gasping for air, his face pale and his eyes wide with undisguised fear. He rushed to his mother, burying his face in her side. The party ended abruptly after that. Mr. Giggles was asked to leave, his apologies and attempts to explain his actions ignored as Laura comforted a shaken Tommy. The guests departed quietly, the festive mood ruined by the unsettling events. Later, we learned that the entertainer known as Mr. Giggles had been struggling with personal and mental health issues, which might have influenced his inappropriate behavior that day. He had kept these challenges hidden, maintaining his role as a beloved children's performer until his actions at the party brought everything to light. That birthday was supposed to be a day of joy and celebration, but instead, it turned into a disturbing memory that none of us would soon forget. The incident served as a grim reminder of how easily a seemingly harmless situation can turn sinister, and the importance of vigilance, even in settings meant for fun and laughter. As for Tommy, he never asked for a clown at his birthday again, and frankly, neither did any of us. It started with an innocuous envelope in the mail, cream-colored and slightly thicker than usual. I didn't recognize the handwriting, a meticulous script that seemed almost painstakingly drawn. When I slid it open, a birthday invitation fell out, one that sent a chill straight through me. It was for a party at an old, somewhat infamous mansion on the outskirts of town, the kind of place that local legends are made of. But it wasn't the venue that unsettled me, it was the host. The card read, "Jason Cordell invites you to celebrate." Jason Cordell. Just seeing his name in print brought a flood of memories, none of them good. In high school, Jason had developed an unhealthy obsession with me. It started subtly, notes in my locker, stares across the classroom, unwanted gifts. But as the months passed, his behavior grew more intense and frightening. He began following me home and was often seen lurking around my family's property at night. I had hoped that graduating high school and moving to a different city would put an end to his disturbing behavior. For a while, it did. Or so I thought. Now, 10 years later, the past was knocking at my door, quite literally. Holding the invitation in my hand, I felt a visceral fear. How did he find me after all these years? Why now? Questions swirled in my head as I paced my kitchen, the invitation glaring at me from the countertop. Curiosity and a need for closure propelled me to do something that, in hindsight, was incredibly foolish. I decided to go. I needed to see Jason, to confront him, to ensure he understood that his past obsessions were unwanted and needed to end. I told myself that I was in control, that this time I was prepared. Looking back, I realize how naive I was. The day of the party arrived with a storm brewing on the horizon, both literally and figuratively. As I drove to the mansion, the sky grew ominously dark, and rain began to splatter against my windshield, as if warning me to turn back. The mansion itself was a Gothic relic, standing stark against the stormy sky, its windows like dark, watching eyes. I parked my car and made my way to the entrance, my heart pounding with every step. The door swung open before I could even knock, revealing Jason standing in the foyer. He hadn't changed much, his gaze still intense, his smile too eager. "Lila, you came. I'm so glad," he said, his voice smooth, too rehearsed. There was no warmth in his eyes, just a calculating coldness that made me shiver. The house was strangely quiet, the ambience eerie. I noticed then that there were no other cars outside, no signs of a party in progress. A spike of real fear shot through me. "Where is everyone?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, it'll just be us tonight." "A private celebration," he replied, his smile widening but not reaching his cold, dark eyes. Panic set in, and instinctively, I turned to leave, but Jason was faster. He grabbed my arm, his grip painfully tight. "You can't leave yet, Lila. The party's just started." I struggled, my survival instincts kicking in full force, but Jason dragged me deeper into the mansion. He was frighteningly strong, his demeanor that of a man who had planned this moment down to the last detail. He pushed me into a dimly lit room, the walls lined with pictures. As my eyes adjusted to the low light, I realized with horror that they were all photos of me, spanning years. Photos from before high school and some disturbingly recent. It was clear then that Jason had never stopped watching me, never moved on. "This is your life, Lila," through my eyes, he said, a twisted pride in his voice. "You see, you were never really gone. Not to me." I felt bile rise in my throat, the terror so intense that it was almost paralyzing. But fear can be a potent motivator. When he momentarily loosened his grip, distracted by his grotesque gallery, I took my chance. I smashed a nearby lamp into his head, the impact sending him reeling. Not waiting to see if he was down, I ran. I didn't stop, not even as I heard him shouting my name from behind, his calls mixed with curses and threats. I burst out of the house, into the storm, the rain masking my tears. I drove away, pushing my old car as fast as it would go, not stopping until I reached the safety of my apartment. Once there, I called the police, my voice shaking as I tried to explain what had happened. The police acted quickly, arresting Jason at the mansion. It turned out the house wasn't even his, he had broken in, setting the stage for his sick game. They told me I was lucky to have gotten out when I did, that my instincts had probably saved my life. Since that night, I've moved again, this time leaving no trace of my whereabouts. I've changed my name, my appearance, my life. But the fear has never quite left me. Sometimes, in the dark of the night, I still hear his voice, see his face in the shadows. The sinister birthday party was meant to be a celebration of control for Jason, a culmination of his obsession. For me, it was a horrifying glimpse into the mind of a stalker, a reminder that sometimes, the monsters we fear are all too real. My son, Daniel, has always been the quiet type, thoughtful and introverted, content with his books and his art. His 30th birthday was approaching, and despite my suggestions to throw a party, he opted to spend it alone, reflecting on his life, as he put it. I worried that solitude would only sink him deeper into his own thoughts, a place I knew could be as dark as it was deep. But Daniel was stubborn, like his father, God rest his soul, and when he made up his mind, that was that. On the morning of his birthday, I called him, like I did every day. He sounded distant but insisted he was fine and just needed some time to think and clear his head. He promised he'd stay safe and call me later that night. I reluctantly agreed, telling him I loved him and reminding him, not for the first time, that he wasn't alone, no matter how much he felt like it. The day passed slowly, each tick of the clock a thudding heartbeat in my chest. I busied myself with chores, trying not to watch the phone, but by 10 o'clock, with no call from Daniel, I couldn't keep the dread at bay. I rang him, once, twice, then a third time, each call dumped to voicemail. My heart raced, panic clawing at my throat as scenarios raced through my mind. Daniel was always punctual, always considerate, something was wrong. Swallowing my fear, I dialed the police, explaining my son was missing, that he was alone, possibly in danger. The dispatcher's voice was calm, too calm, asking questions that seemed to mock my growing terror. They promised to start a search, to check his last known locations, and urged me to stay by the phone. The night stretched on, endless and silent. I sat in the dim light of the living room, surrounded by shadows that seemed to whisper my deepest fears back to me. Every creak and sigh of the house was a cruel mimicry of my son's footsteps, a bitter reminder of his absence. When the call finally came, it wasn't the one I'd prayed for. A hiker had found Daniel's phone near the cliffs outside of town, a place he often went to draw and take photographs. There was no sign of Daniel, just his phone, lying in the dirt like a discarded clue in some cruel game. The police searched through the night and into the next day, the cliffs a silent witness to their efforts. I couldn't sit idle, I drove to the cliffs, the ocean churning below as if mirroring the turmoil inside me. The search teams were thorough, moving methodically through the brush, calling his name into the wind. But the cliffs offered no answers, holding tight to their secrets. Days turned into weeks. The police found nothing more. No signs of a struggle, no further clues, just the eerie silence of the unyielding landscape. Theories abounded. Had he fallen? Had someone taken him? Or had the weight of his own solitude driven him to step off the edge? The not knowing was a torment, a nightmare from which I couldn't wake. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake, staring into the darkness, listening to the silence of the house, a silence once broken by the sound of Daniel's late-night movements, his soft laughter at something he read, the scratch of his pen as he drew. Now, there was nothing, just the echo of my own breath and the distant roar of the ocean. Posters went up, faces in coffee shops and on lamp posts, all carrying Daniel's smiling face, a cruel reminder of the light that had been extinguished in my life. Strangers called, claiming sightings, each lead followed, each ending in disappointment. My hope began to fray, worn thin by the constant cycle of hope and despair. Months passed, turning into a year. The police marked his case inactive, a cold file in a drawer of unsolved mysteries. But a mother's hope, fueled by love and desperation, knows no such closure. I kept searching, kept hoping, kept praying for a sign. Then, on the second anniversary of his disappearance, a call came. A fisherman had found a backpack washed up on the shore, miles from where Daniel's phone had been discovered. It was Daniel's, unmistakably so, still packed with his sketchpad, his pens, and a half-finished drawing of the cliffs. The discovery launched a new search, but again, it led nowhere, a dead end in a trail gone cold. The cliff stood mocking, the ocean below indifferent to my grief. The sketchbook was returned to me, the pages a testament to Daniel's talent and his tormented soul. His last drawing, those haunting cliffs, seemed almost prophetic, as if he'd known his fate. Now, years later, I am an old woman, my hair gray and my heart weary with loss. The pain has dulled to an ache, a constant companion in my quiet house. Daniel's room remains untouched, his art still on the walls, his presence felt in every corner. I talk to him sometimes, telling him about my day, pretending he can hear me, pretending he might walk through the door at any moment. But the truth is a colder comfort. My son vanished, swallowed by the vastness of his own sadness and the merciless beauty of the cliffs. And I, a mother left behind, remain here, holding on to the fragments of his memory, waiting for answers I fear will never come. The silence of the house is overwhelming tonight, the anniversary of the day I last heard his voice. I sit by the phone, not expecting a call, but needing the connection to a time when the sound of it could still bring me joy. Outside, the wind cries through the trees, a mournful sound that seems to carry the echoes of a lost soul, calling me to join him in the silent night.